Every vintage item has a story, and every vintage shop does too. I'm your host, Sloane Middleton Mann, founder of Business of Vintage, the world's only marketing agency built specifically for vintage shops. Celebrate the past while thriving today on the Business of Vintage podcast.
Today on the show, I'm joined by someone who many might consider your favorite vintage dealer's favorite vintage dealer, Karyn Dethrow. Karyn Dethrow is the curator and founder of Dethrose Vintage, a Chicago-based vintage shop specializing in reviving pieces from the 1910s to the 1990s to be worn and loved again. Karyn takes pride in mending and cleaning each piece to be as close to its original state so it's ready to wear as soon as it arrives to her customer's door anywhere in the world. Her pieces have been worn on screen in major productions, sought after by collectors, and styled in a way that is unmistakably her own, a mid-century timelessness with a hint of attitude. She was recently part of the very first Pickwick Vintage Show in Chicago, helping bring a beloved market to the Midwest for the very first time. As we head into the busiest season for vintage sellers, the holiday season, I'm talking with Karyn about holiday shopping, what makes a standout market experience, and what it's really like to sell vintage to television and film. Thank you, Karyn.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to have you. And I was not kidding when I said you are everyone's favorite vintage dealer's favorite vintage dealer.
Thank you so much.
You've been around for many years now. How long has Dethrose Vintage been your business?
15 years in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Of course. For folks who are new to the world of Dethrose Vintage, how would you describe the brand?
I wanted to make a brand that was something for everybody, that it wasn't just like a typical vintage store that could be kitschy or costumey. Like, I really wanted to focus on pieces that would translate to like modern fashion and continue to be worn for years and years. So I really wanted to focus on a sustainable vintage brand. And over the years, I feel like I've finally gotten it to exactly where I want it.
Yeah, I feel like your style of your brand is so unique and immediately recognizable as yours. What sparked your original love for vintage?
I grew up with older siblings, and we're talking like a decade or more older. And I watched their styles evolved as a little girl and seeing them as teenagers. And then my mother has always had a love for old movies. So I grew up watching movies from the 1930s and the 1940s and really falling in love with the actresses like Ginger Rogers and Katharine Hepburn. And I watched those when I was so little that all I wanted to do was play with vintage clothing. And my mom wishes she would have kept more of her things, but she's definitely like out with the old and with the new. But now she's like, I remember, that style from this time period or things from her high school. And yeah, I just got a love for it and went with it.
It's amazing. I do feel like I see so much like old school Hollywood glam in your styles and everything from your haircut to your interior of your shop.
Yeah, I just love the details that were so specific back then, like the textures of things, the patterns, the different mixes of fabrics, down to like the types of pockets, to like even the lining that no one will ever see. Some of the lining and things are so detailed, and there's so much work that goes into it that you just don't see anymore with modern clothing.
It's so true. You mentioned that you feel like you've come to the style of your brand over time. What was that process like?
When I first started, I was kind of going with the trends that I was seeing. So I was selling like a lot of, it was 2010, it was the years of the hipster and lots of neon colors and 80s and 70s stuff. And I just wasn't really connected to it. And it was fun to find, it was fun to thrift, but I didn't feel like as big of a connection to it. And I ended up getting a buy from a random woman that I met in a thrift store, and she liked the style that I was wearing, which was very 1950s at the time. And she invited me back to her house and she let me purchase her grandmother's entire collection. And it was all 1930s and 1940s. And that was honestly the thing that shifted my brand to be what it is today. Because that's when I was like, this is what I want to sell to people. Like, this is the stuff that will never go out of style.
Wow, that is so special. I mean, when I think of Dethrose vintage, like that's the 1950s, the mid-century kind of timelessness is what I think of. So it's interesting to hear about your neon 80s side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. If you go way far back on my Etsy, you'll see those photos and be like, wow, she was really selling like acid wash jeans back then. And it was a lot of fun. And it's what started my business. And so I think fondly on it. But yeah, I'm definitely more connected to the way things are now.
That's amazing. And when you feel alignment in your business, I feel like that's when things really take off. Did you have an experience like that?
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. It took a while for me to go full time. I had a full time job when I started all of this. And I opened my first Etsy store and it took off. And I was kind of surprised. I really just thought I would list like 25 pieces and it literally sold out in like a week. And I was like, oh, well, I need to go and find more. And I was just doing it as a hobby for like the first year and a half. And then after I was finding more and more older pieces and going out and searching more and taking more of that time, I opened up my first studio and showroom and I started to see like an increase of interest. And then it wasn't until I opened up my first storefront and I had my Etsy store, I had my storefront. This was 2013. It was like overnight. I had like maybe 2,000 followers on Instagram and I wasn't super active on there. And then overnight, I got like 20,000 followers. And I didn't know where it came from. And this was back when Etsy really wanted to build up their sellers. And they did a spotlight feature on me. And then I had a new bio written about my storefront. And then all of a sudden, there was this sense of urgency for people to like purchase from my online store before it sold out in my storefront. Then it just kept growing and it got to where it is now today. And I just couldn't believe how like quickly it escalated.
That's incredible. The early days of the internet were truly something special.
They were, I remember them fondly.
That's amazing. How do you balance your strong personal aesthetic or your strong brand aesthetic with customer preferences? You mentioned doing things that were more aligned with trends before, and now you're focused on a more sustainable brand style with, trends always ever changing. How is that a balance that you're bridging?
I kind of took consideration into how I shop and how I am. And I've always been somebody who doesn't want to be told what to wear. I don't want to be told what other people think looks good. I don't want to be told what my personality is through the clothing or my makeup or my hair, whatever it is. I wanted to extend that to other people, especially women who maybe haven't found their voice in their style and their clothing, and also make them not feel like you have to wear this specific thing in a trend to feel beautiful. You have to be this size to be beautiful. You have to look like this person to be beautiful. And I just thought it was like this pressure on women just sucks. I don't want women to feel the pressure like I have to wear this specific look because this is what told me was in style. And if I don't wear that, I'm going to not be a part of it. And I'm like, I think it is so much more like beautiful to see somebody who's strong and confident in their self and it comes out in like what they're showing the world. And to give that to other people that maybe haven't found that footing yet, that's what I wanted to focus on. My favorite client that comes in is somebody who's never worn or experienced vintage before. And that is the majority of my clientele for the most part. I love letting them figure out what they love, not because of what magazines or social media or whoever has told them they're supposed to love, but to create a sense of individuality. And I just think that that's the biggest thing that can boost a person's confidence.
That's really beautiful. Tell me about how you help these customers figure out their personal style when they're coming to shop at your store.
I really start with the basics, which is I ask them, what colors do you love? What colors do you gravitate towards? What colors do you not like? What colors do you like, but you don't know if they'll look good on you? And then also, like, what are you comfortable showing in your body? Like, do you want things to be fitted? Do you want them to be looser? Have you ever tried anything fitted? And then providing them with measurements because a lot of people don't know their own measurements. And they're given these set of numbers in modern fashion where like you're an extra small or you're a large or you're a size 0, you're a size 14 or you're this or you're that. And when you take those sizes out of context and be like, let's focus on your measurements, it makes it so much easier. And again, it alleviates so much pressure and it makes people feel more confident in the size that they are. And that can help open the gates of like what their style is because they might have their mind open to like a style that they didn't think that they could wear based on that number or letter system of sizing. And it's much easier to convince people to like try everything on and let's go from there and see what speaks to you.
Wow. That's really special. I love that. So you have an in-person location and this is a space where you host like appointment only or specialty shopping events and you do this with your different customers?
Yes, and it's my favorite. I would rather do that every week than sell online because it's so much easier to guide and also communicate with people that maybe don't know where to begin. I know an online store can sometimes be really intimidating. They don't know, but I try and provide like there's a measurement chart on my website. I try and provide as much help as possible and they can live chat with me if they want
Mm.
on my website. So I would rather give in-person assistance and kind of also build people up. I don't think enough retail does that for people, honestly.
That is so real. You mentioned that most of your customers end up being people who have never shopped vintage before. How do you think they're finding you in that case?
I think a lot of that has to be Chicago's great. We have a lot of vintage shops here where people will share, other stores with one another. And I'm close with like Lost Girls Vintage and Knee Deep Vintage. I'd have to say are like two of my biggest supporters and vice versa. And so it's nice to get like new clients that come from like the community
Yeah.
and there's often like people that will reach out to me because they saw something that they saw online about vintage and it just sparked an interest and they start from there.
It's amazing. Do you have any styling tips that you share with shoppers at these in person appointments?
Yeah, one tip, which I think is a big tip that everybody can have, it's not just for styling, but whenever you go into a store and you want to start, I love improv, like comedy improv. And a big, huge part of comedy improv is yes anding. So you always yes and your partner, your comedy partner, instead of being negative and declining their idea. And I'm like, I kind of take that into clothing. So yes, and yourself. And instead of going in and say, I can't wear this because I'm this, or this, all negative thoughts. Because the first thing people want to do is judge their own body. And I always say, just yes, and like instead of saying my butt's too big, say I have a really full figure or I have fuller hips. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with different body types. And so I kind of try and set the mindset of come in with a positive attitude. Don't ever be mean to yourself because the second your brain hears that negativity, that's all it's going to think when it sees yourself in the mirror. And so it's so much easier to come in and be like, yeah, I'm going to try this. Even though I think it might not work, I'm going to yes and it and I'm going to try it and I'm going to keep doing that. And it really resets the mind frame as far as like personal styling goes because then you're willing and able to try anything and you might find something that you weren't going to yes and that you didn't think would work on you that did. And also just taking out society's pressures in general from putting on clothing. Like, who says that you can't have a crop top if you're a larger size? I say, like, wear that crop top, do it, and
Yeah.
just like break whatever society's stigmas have given us. It's just all ridiculous. And I think everybody should just be comfortable in whatever they're wearing.
Yep.
And that is like the number one pro styling tip that I can ever give people is like just try and just be kind to yourself and it'll just make you love things way more.
I love that. And I think some of the beauty with yes anding in the vintage world is that you kind of take that leap and find that super special piece that if you weren't yes anding yourself, you might say, well, I don't have an event for that, or I don't know where I'm going to wear that. Just wear your clothes, like feel beautiful.
I'm like, you don't need an event.
No.
Make up an event. My boyfriend and I, we make up events all the time. Like we'll have a fancy dinner in. Like you just put on a cocktail dress and have dinner with like a friend or even by yourself. Like who cares? I'm going to wear whatever I want whenever I want. And I don't care if it's I wear a fur coat to the grocery store and I do not care who's looking. It's for me. And that's the other thing is I really would love people to dress for themselves. Like I don't dress for anyone but myself. And if I feel like getting dressed up, I do. And if I don't, I don't.
That's so special. You were recently part of the first ever Pickwick Vintage Show in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked much about whether you do many markets, but how has that market been differentiated from your in-person shopping experience?
That market was hands down one of the best markets that I've done in years. I've done a lot of markets. That's how I started my brand was mostly doing markets, just like putting yourself out there. And I was very fortunate coming up in a time where the vintage community was so vast and everybody in Chicago knew each other and you worked these markets and you got to know friends. And some of my best friends are people that I met back then. And with this market, it really gave Chicago something that it hasn't had in a while. It was like a smaller market. It wasn't super overwhelming, which I think is so important. And you could tell like each vendor was carefully chosen and they all stood out with their own brand, which is amazing for the customer shopping because they know exactly like, oh, I got this from this person because that's their brand and that's how they stand out. All the vendors that were chosen too, everybody was so supportive and so kind and so helpful and directing like, oh, well, if you didn't find anything in my booth, this person over here has great stuff. You should check them out. And there wasn't that feeling of competition, which is so great because I've never been a believer in competing with other vintage stores because everyone has something different. So it makes no sense to compete when I have something that somebody may love and the person next to me might have something that they'll love even more. And there's enough for everybody to go around. And that market was all about vibes. Like the people felt it when they came in. It was just nothing but positivity the whole day for the sellers and the buyers. And it was just beautifully curated and executed. I haven't heard a single negative thing about the weekend from anyone. It was wonderful.
I'm so glad to hear that. The organizers behind Pickwick and A Current Affair and all of those shows, they really know what they're doing. And it's been so impressive to hear from sellers at all the different locations and different types of shows that they've organized, all saying, incredible things about that show. And something that I had noted from the Current Affair in New York that I was working at was how much people were coming to this event to shop. I've been to so many markets where people are coming to hang out with their friends, to go to the food trucks, to socialize.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the same at Pickwick. It seems like it, but at this Current Affair in New York, it was like people were shopping. And that's what they were there for. They were not chit-chatting.
No, there was no real people were being social, but they came in the door, they knew what they were doing, they knew what they were looking for, and they were there to shop. They weren't there to just browse. They weren't there to just see. They were there to buy something. I mean, I would put money on it. I doubt anybody left empty-handed at that show. I really doubt it. I didn't leave empty-handed.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's such a differentiator in when a market is organized with the positioning of having it being a shopping event forward versus having it be a fun activity, things to do, in the results that it gets for the vendors. It's truly incredible.
I think a big part too of why this was so successful. So I've done Pickwick in LA and I've done A Current Affair in New York when it first started. And something that I noticed that a lot of markets here and other places don't do is the setting up of the booths. It's not set up like normal markets. Normal markets do like a 10 by 10 booth. It's like a square. And Richard, the founder of Pickwick and Current Affair, he's like an open concept, but a booth is clearly defined, but it's the way that the racks are positioned. It's like opening to invite people in. And you wouldn't think just changing the way one rack or two racks are put into a booth would make that big of a difference. But when you see it in person, you're like, oh my gosh, this makes it less overwhelming for the client. It still gives the borders of dealers. So you can still see people's design aesthetic and what their brand is, but it makes it less overwhelming and it really makes the eye flow through the market. It's not as congested. It's not as stuffy looking. It's not as heavy boundaries. And like people aren't like this, like trying to get through like the booth. It's also open that it just worked. And honestly, his shows are the only places I've ever seen that done at. And it makes a huge difference.
It is actually, it was really surprising to me as well the first time I saw it because I'm so used to a market being hyper branded by the different sellers. And I think there is so much benefit to that in helping sellers build a brand. But again, when we're working with the intention of a shopping event, we're minimizing as much friction for the customers as possible. And that's exactly what these rack structures are doing because it's minimizing the overwhelm that already exists tenfold at a vintage market and just putting customers in that mode of, like shopping. I'm just shopping. I'm not understanding this brand. I'm not learning about what their offerings are. Like I'm running the racks and I'm spending my money. So there's pros and cons to each for sure, but I've never heard people having as much monetary success at markets as they have at the Pickwick current affair markets, from what I've heard.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the client knows what to expect. And I had quite a few clients come in that were like, oh, I've been saving months for this show. And the other thing that was great, it kind of had a price point for everyone. I think people often make the assumption that because it's in New York or because it's from LA, that everything's going to be expensive. And everybody kind of brought something for everybody. Like in my rack, I had things that were $35 or I had things that were $600. It was just like a range. And pretty much every seller was consistent with that. So there was a lot for everybody.
That's so special. And so this show was in mid-November. Did it feel like holiday shopping was already starting at that point, or we're thinking it's happening more around this time?
I think it's more around this time. That show was people were buying for themselves 100%. I didn't get one gift. No one had gifts in mind. I think people were just so excited to shop for themselves. And they were shopping for anything and everything, like a lot of coats, a lot of velvets. And I think that had to do with more of the wintry holiday feel. But then there were like blazers and suits, and it was all over the place. And I didn't get the specific holiday feel. It was just kind of starting to sneak in, but it wasn't like full force yet.
I love when people are shopping for themselves. That's so fun.
Yeah, the most fun.
How does your sales approach shift during the holiday season?
I think the holiday season, I try and focus on gifts because I think there's kind of a misconception that you can't shop vintage for gift, that it's too hard. So I offer gift cards during the holidays and I do a gift guide, which is like these are things that are easy to purchase for somebody and jewelry and accessories. And then same with like if you learn somebody's measurements, which is how I shop for other people, it's pretty easy to buy a piece of clothing for them if you know their style and you know what they kind of gravitate towards. So I kind of try and put out a gift guide every season and then also just expressing to my followers how important it is, especially right now, to shop small and that it means the world to small businesses like us that this is all I have. This is all I do. And I want to keep doing it. And I don't want to be beat out by corporations and things that will just sit in landfills. Like I want to make a difference as small as I can and as big as I can with helping people spend their money in places that give back to our communities instead of take away from our communities.
Yeah, that's so important. I've been seeing that. I don't know if you'd call it a meme, but that infographic running around that's like, if you took $40 away from your Amazon purchase and put it towards a small business, I should probably figure out the rest of that graphic. But it was like exorbitant.
Yeah, it's like a crazy difference. And I think when people can kind of measure things in that small of a ratio, that they can kind of wrap their mind around it. And if everyone stopped buying corporate things for just one day and only put into small business, the amount of impact it would put on to this economic climate, it would blow people's mind.
Yeah, it's so important. You mentioned gift card. That is such an incredible way to gift vintage to someone because so many Gen Zs are obsessed with shopping vintage and a lot of people don't know how to shop vintage. And when you give someone a gift card, you're not only supporting that small business, but you're allowing this person to have their own creative expression. And it's also experience that they're going to have in the future too.
Yeah. I love a gift card. I know some people are like, oh, gift cards are an easy holiday gift. And I'm like, they are, but they're also like, you're letting somebody else do the creative part and like pick out something that suits them. I would rather somebody tell me to give them a gift card than what if I don't find that perfect gift for them? And it's like, well, this might be the perfect gift.
Yeah. And especially with giving a gift card to a small business or a vintage shop, because that is a curated gift. Like, you're not giving them just a
Yeah.
blanket Visa gift card. You are putting in thought that you think this person's style suits you. You think this shop's message speaks to the person who you love in your life. And that is curation and that's experience right there.
Yeah. 100%.
You mentioned that you often shop for gifts by using measurements for people in your life. Do you have any advice on how other people could do that as well?
Yeah. So somebody that I shop vintage for quite a bit is my boyfriend's mother. And she loves vintage. And she's a very easy person for me to shop for because she has her like favorite colors, her favorite materials, her favorite styles. And now that I've known her for so long, like I know what silhouettes are great on her. And all we did the first year that I was with him, I was like, sneak me into your mom's closet. And I went into her closet and I took one of the dresses that I've seen her wear that she looked fabulous in, and I just measured it. And then now everything I've ever gifted her, it's been 5 years now, has always fit her like a glove. And we've done the same for his stepdad. We've done the same for my mother. I've done the same for my boyfriend. It's very easy to do. And it's just, I measure the pit to pit bust. I measure just under the bust for around the rib cage. I measure the waist, the hip, around the thigh, the top of the thigh, and then shoulders, arm length. And then I always do shoulder to waist. So I know that it's going to sit where they want it to sit, like on their torso. And like once I got all that stuff down, it's easy.
Wow.
And now I never try on stuff when I go into stores. I know my measurements and I have a measuring tape on me at all times. So I can't remember the last time I tried something on in a vintage shop.
Wow. I mean, so easy to just add to the notes app on your phone and keep a measuring tape in your bag.
Yeah. And when you know that, oh man, so much time and money. You know something's going to fit.
Yeah, I mean, I've only done that for my husband, and I've come home with some crazy finds for him that just fit like a glove. And it's like when you know how to measure an item and you have this person's measurements, that's all you need.
Yeah, truly. Same with shoes. People think you can't gift shoes. You can gift shoes. Like if you can measure, I measure the insole of the shoe and then the width of the insole, and that's all you need.
Wow. What about hats? You could do this with hats too, huh?
Yeah, you can do it with hats. Measure somebody's head and then measure the inside rim of the hat. Yeah, it's easy. It's not as difficult as people think it might be. And I think once somebody learns how to measure themselves and measure a piece of clothing, it just opens up a whole new world.
My gosh, this is going to be such an unlock for the Gen Z vintage obsessed gifters. That is such a great tip. Thanks for sharing that. I'd love to talk a little bit about your experience working with television and film stylists, because I know that is something that is really stand out about Dethrose Vintage. You've been featured in some incredible pieces of media. Tell me about where your pieces have been featured.
The first show that ever purchased from me was a show called The American that came out on FX with Carrie Russell and Matthew Reese. They played like sleeper cell spies from Russia, and it took place in the 80s, but they had costuming there where they were wearing stuff from like the 40s, the 50s, all kinds of stuff. So I sold a bunch of skirts and shoes, and they were all for Carrie's character. And it was like right when I opened up my store, and I was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I'm going to see these pieces on TV. And after that, like a lot of period shows started. So, like Mad Men, the costume, Janie Bryant, but she wasn't the person doing the purchasing, but her assistants were. They purchased a few things. Riverdale purchased a few things. Lovecraft Country, that was one of my favorite shows on HBO. They purchased a lot of stuff and they filmed here in Chicago. And that was really cool because you'd see like people in the background scenes, like wearing stuff. And I think they shopped at pretty much every store in Chicago. They were really doing it up because there were so many people on that set. I'm forgetting so many, but there's been a lot. Oh, Fargo. There was the Chicago episodes of Fargo, and they bought like a bunch of stuff too. And they were really wonderful to work with. And then it's just be like little random movies that will reach out or buy through my website, or I've done like FaceTime videos with stylists that do costuming on movie sets. They'll give me the measurement and I'll go through my store's inventory and just pick out all the stuff that fit those measurements and see if it works. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And like it's even though I don't design these clothes, so you'd think I wouldn't have like that much pride in it, but it's still cool to be like, "Oh, that's something I bought and I picked myself and now it works for this celebrity." It's kind of cool.
Seriously cool. And you meant so many of your items as well. They would have had to make these items from scratch or buy them new if it wasn't for you.
Yeah, and I do know that a lot of these really amazing costume designers, they'll buy stuff that they love but won't fit the actor, actresses trying them on, and so they'll make it. They'll, like, have their department make the piece, and it's pretty awesome. So they'll buy things just as kind of like a guide.
Wow, like a pattern.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What have you noticed is different between selling to film, television stylists versus the everyday consumer?
The everyday consumer, I think, puts more thought into individual pieces when they're purchasing. I know with like costume designers or film stylists, they buy quickly and they buy in bulk and they buy as like, this might work, this might not work. And like the individual consumer, they're not buying by chance and what might not work and what might work. So they know they come in with an idea and they don't tend to, and honestly, like I don't like to sell people stuff I don't think that they would wear or want. And that is I'm very honest with my customers and I will not tell somebody something looks great on them if it doesn't, or it won't work with their personal style, or if they're kind of like on the fence about something, I'm not going to push them to pull that trigger. I'm going to let them decide because I think that far too many times in retail, you feel pressure to consume. And sometimes it's just not right. And I want it to always be right.
Yeah. That's so interesting that, you would think that the production designers would be putting more thought in because their selections are going to have millions of eyes.
Yeah, I'm sure they do, but they just buy so quickly and so fast. Like they come in knowing exactly what they want, but then they'll see something else and they're like, this might work. And so they'll just grab it. I, the one stylist I worked with, he's a really brilliant costume designer on a lot of different movies. He bought stuff with other things already in mind. Like, we haven't laid out the pattern or the colors for this set yet, but I'm going to take this just in case. Or they might buy a dress that isn't the right color, but it's the right style, and they'll buy it as kind of like an inspiration piece and try and look for something similar in a different color that they are needing. And one specific they usually always do is they rarely buy black. Black doesn't resonate well on television or in film. So they don't really buy, they stick to color and they don't do like loud patterns either, unless it's like for a very specific scene or person, but they kind of stick with subtle patterns and in appealing colors.
I'd imagine like great textures as well.
Yeah, things that will read well on camera.
How do you feel like these connections came about with the stylists on these film and television sets? Were they finding you through your existing social media presence, or is there a way that you would give advice to another vintage dealer as to how to connect with this crowd?
I wish I had advice on it. They have found me organically. They have either found me through, if they're filming in our city, they've found me through Google. I've like just come up as one of the stores that they're going to hit on their list. Or I've been referred from another store that they had just went and shopped at. Online, it's been very random. I think they're just using different search methods. Like there's gem search, which is amazing for finding vintage. And then just typing in, like vintage clothing for whatever decades they want and coming up in their search. I definitely had more when I was on Etsy because it is a larger platform. So you could just type in 1940s dress. And I think gem search is doing that as well for us vintage dealers, which is amazing. It's a great app that people should definitely support. But most part, it's been organic. I've not been good about searching it out myself. I probably should, but yeah, we're lucky enough to have the relationships here with other stores in Chicago that send them my way.
That's amazing. Do they ever ask for specific sourcing requests, or is it pretty much just going through the items with the measurements and that's it?
Both. They do have sourcing requests for like certain styles, especially if I don't have it, but I know that I'm going to be going out. They'll be like, if you come across, this type of shoe or this type of hat, we're looking for this specific type of hat. Like they do give you, if there's enough time, they're usually very crunched for time. But when they do have the time, they'll give you a list of what kind of things that they're looking for and colors. They'll let you know right away, like, I don't want any of these colors. We're looking for this kind of style only. Riverdale was very specific of colors and patterns and styles. One movie, I can't remember the name of it, but it came out a few years ago with Anne Hathaway. There were certain materials that would aggravate the actress's skin. So they're like, no materials like this. And yeah, so they do have their specifics.
Yeah, I feel like this is such an interesting and amazing customer base for vintage sellers to get in front of. And I think your shop's aesthetic of being more 1940s, 1950s, it's an interesting space to be for specifically film and television.
Mhm. Yeah, I wish there were more period films. It would be great. I love buying 30s and 40s. Those are my and 70s. Like those are my favorite decades. And I wish I found more of it too. It's my favorite.
It's amazing. With pieces from the 1930s, we're almost coming up on 100 years.
I know, it's crazy.
Do you ever use pieces from the 1930s with these film and television stars, or is it too fragile even for a production use case?
Well, I know that people think it's all fragile, but it's not. And that's the other reason why I like to sell the older stuff. It can be if it wasn't taken care of. If it wasn't properly stored, if it wasn't properly laundered, the items can be very delicate and fragile. But for the most part, if you take care of your clothing, and the clothing back then, it was made so well, the quality was so good, it will last another 50 years. I'm convinced. I have so many pieces that I personally wear from like the 1930s that I've had for 15 years now, and I haven't had to do anything to them. It's just a different type, like even the wool coats, like all of my coats are either fur or wool. And if you take a modern wool coat made from the late 80s to today and compare it to a 1930s or 1940s wool coat, you would be amazed of the difference of quality. The wool back then, the woolen mills were so much thicker, heavier. And now, like a wool coat is so thin and not that warm. Like people are amazed. Like I don't own like a down puffy coat that most Chicagoans.
Yeah, that's so Chicago.
I used to until I started wearing vintage coats. My vintage coats are warmer than any modern puffy coat on the market today. I can be in negative below 0 10. And my wool coat, there will not be wind penetration in it. It is so warm and cozy. And they're lined in silk, which silk is one of the warmest fabrics that you can wear. And they just last forever. Even seaming, like the thread that people use back then, a lot of them were like cotton thread, silk thread, rayon thread. Today it's polyester or it's plastic. Those break, they wear down, they fall apart. I rarely have a broken seam on the clothing that I wear if it's been taken care of. And so every season I switch out my own clothing as I do in my store where I put it in storage and I store it in cedar. So like bugs and moths and stuff can't get to it. I also make sure to clean all of my items because the more you have things dry cleaned or hand wash, the longer they'll last because you don't have like our skin, just sitting on it and wearing in the closet and wearing through the fabric. And then being mindful of like temperature with storage. Like if you store things in too much heat, it'll wear down the fabric. Too much cold, it'll wear down the fabric. It's really about having like good temperature and keeping it off hangers really helps. Like between seasons, just take your things off hangers, put it in like a cedar chest or something.
Thank you for these tips. These are great.
Try and get people to have things last for a really long time.
Seriously, I mean, pieces from the 1930s being warmer than a North Face, I wouldn't have known it, but, especially as it's snowing in Chicago already, it's good to know.
Yeah. I mean, think about it back then. The Chicagoans, that's what they were wearing. They were wearing these wool coats. And if somebody's okay with wearing fur, like fur coats, that's the warmest you can get.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. What's one lesson you had to learn the hard way while running Dethrose Vintage?
comparing yourself to other people, like comparing your store to others, having that mentality of like looking and seeing what other people are doing and why something may not be working for you, but it's working for them. And really focusing on like your own voice and your own style. And like they say it with the doom scrolling on Instagram, like if you compare yourself to other people's lives, no one would ever be happy. And it's just like really focusing on yourself and like the work that you put forth in things. And also knowing like it's hard work. Things just don't come easy. And there's going to be ebbs and flows in this business. And even though somebody might be at a low and another person's at a high, it doesn't mean that that scale doesn't constantly move. And I think that lesson came with age and just learning. Everybody has their time to shine, and that time can come at random moments throughout your entire life. It can be a constant up, but then there's might be a plateau, there might be a decline. But as long as you're still focused and true to yourself, I always think that that up will always come back.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think anyone could take that lesson. I love it. If you could give advice to anyone who's just starting out in vintage, what would it be?
Oh, there's so much. Integrity. Always keep it intact. Let that always be your focus on your brand and on what you're doing. Treat people with kindness and respect. I am a huge person that I will never fight somebody for a dress at an estate sale. I will never give up my own dignity for that and to keep integrity. Like, be honest about your brand, be honest about what you're selling, be honest about your practices. And I just think that that's the only way to really do anything by. But especially in this business, there's some moments where you'll see an unkindness that's out there. And I honestly believe like your integrity and like always being humble is the first thing that's important to stay true to yourself.
Thank you. Well, it was so amazing chatting with you and getting to know you today, Karyn. You've shared some incredible stories and advice that I think a lot of vintage sellers and vintage shoppers alike will be using. So, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. This was fun. I've been looking forward to this.
I know, me too. Can you let any listeners know where they can find you in person or online?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is dethrosvintage.com. You can shop there. You can book an appointment there. You can ask me questions there via chat. You can see my events on there. You can also follow me on Instagram, which is Dethrose Vintage on Instagram. I update that daily. So that's the best way to connect with me and see what's going on. And you also get to see my buying stories and what I'm doing.
Love it.
But if anybody's visiting Chicago or in Chicago, definitely come and book an appointment because that's the best.
I love it. Amazing. Thank you, Karyn.
Thank you so much.